Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Gareth Greenaway joins me. We're going to be talking about OpenRheinRuhr, a conference in Germany. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Gareth Greenaway. Episode 502, recorded October 17th, 2018. OpenRheinRuhr. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, a podcast from Red Hat. Listen to the epic true tales of the developers, programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels revolutionizing the technology landscape. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit redhat.com/heroes today. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, little projects, projects you may be using every day and not totally aware of it at all, projects you may want to download right after the show. Well, that's typical if we have a project, but today's not quite a project. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's go ahead and welcome my lovely and talented co-host, Gareth Greenaway. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Randall. Thanks for having me back. Always glad to be here.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you know, there was such a long absence where you weren't here for a while. I think it's probably because you were really, really busy with work and stuff. And now I'm glad to have you back. I think, twice in like 6 weeks, something like that, right?
Something like that. Yeah. It's
right.
It's a record.
Mm-mm. Well, for now. And where are we speaking to you from? No, where are you speaking to us from? I get that backwards occasionally.
I am in my secret above ground, underground bunker in Thousand Oaks, California.
Right. And I am in an unusual place, although you can't tell because I can't show you the window here. I am once again back in Fort Lauderdale, or close to it, Pomona Beach, which is like just a little suburb north of Fort Lauderdale. I am here being unjet lagged on my way to the All Things Open conference coming up next week. So I'm over here trying to make sure I'm aligned to East Coast time, although I slept in a little bit today. It was actually pretty decent. Working here with my my buddy, Captain Neil Bauman, who does the Insight Cruises stuff. We've been working on some code for his website. And he has thankfully stepped out for a few minutes, so you won't see him on screen. It'll be fine. So we're going to talk about a conference today. We've got Christoph coming on in a few minutes, who is the head honcho coordinator for OpenRheinRuhr, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I did take 2 years of German in high school, but I forgot everything. I forgot everything about it. And I wish I would have taken 2 years of Spanish instead, but that's okay. So OpenRheinRuhr is a 2-day conference. Happens. This is an annual conference. Apparently, it happens in Germany, and it's coming up very soon. I think November 7th and 8th, something like that. Really, really soon. And that's part of why I wanted to bring you on today, because I think you know a little bit about creating conferences, right?
I've had a little experience in the past of organizing and running a conference.
And you're not going to plug it yourself. You did Scale. You invented Scale.
I was one of the original founders and organizers for 14 years for Scale, the Southern California Linux Expo. So, like I said, I ran that for 14 years. Stepped away from it a couple years ago. But yeah, it was a huge learning experience. So I'm curious to see how my experience aligns with Christoph's and OpenRheinRuhr.
Yep, definitely cool. And so great. So we'll bring Christoph on in just a second. But before that, I have a very important message, because this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, an original podcast for geeks by geeks from Red Hat. Command Line Heroes is dedicated to telling the epic true tales of the developers, programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels who are revolutionizing the technology landscape. What is a command line hero? You might be one if you've ever taken apart something to see how it works, or you'd rather make your own. Command line heroes are the makers, builders, dreamers, and doers who are transforming tech and shaping our tomorrows. Season 2 is all about living the command line and tracking the changes that shape the world of open source development. They're discovering the origins of programming languages, mastering the art of making a pull request, learning about supercomputers, hybrid clouds, and more. Command Line Heroes is produced by Red Hat, an open source company that started in the apartment 25 years ago and knows a thing or two about where tech came from and where it's going. Season 2 is also hosted by Saran Yitbarek, a developer who founded Code Newbie, hosts 2 other tech podcasts, and lives and breathes open source software. They're taking Season 2 to great heights and beyond. Episode 1 launched on September 11th, so visit redhat.com/heroes to check it out today. Subscribe to Command Line Heroes wherever you get your podcasts and visit redhat.com/heroes for extras and to learn more. That's redhat.com/heroes. And we appreciate Red Hat for their sponsorship of FLOSS Weekly. And let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Christoph, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Randall. How are things?
Doing well, right. And where are you speaking to us from?
From Frankfurt, and it's good to be back on FLOSS Weekly.
Yes, and you were on a couple of years ago. I think it was about some programming language of some kind.
No, 2016. It was about the kids event that we, the LUG Frankfurt, are running now, the 3rd year in a row.
Okay.
The Mouse Door Opener Day. You probably recall this, where I talked about introducing kids to free and open source software between the ages of 6 and 12 for a full day.
Oh, yeah. That was a great show. It was obviously a lot of fun. And unfortunately, I don't remember much about it because that was a couple of years ago, and I tend to blur a little bit on that long a time ago. So let's talk about OpenRheinRuhr. What is it? It's a conference. It's every year. Tell us about it.
It's all about T-shirts, you see.
Yeah.
That's it. There's nothing more to it. No, I'm only kidding. There are 3 big free and open source software conferences in any given year in Germany. This is Chemnitzer Linux Tage, FrostCon, and taking place in the summer, and of course OpenRheinRuhr. OpenRheinRuhr has been in existence for the last 10 years. We run it on 9 occasions. 2012 was a non-event, but apart from that, we have been running it every year since 2009.
And what might I see if I went to this? It's a 2-day event, right? Coming up soon?
Imagine a scale for 2 days in Western Germany, and then you have it. It's, scale is, I think, if I understand the website correctly, I've never been there, unfortunately, but it's definitely on my list of conferences to go to, but it's a long way from Frankfurt to, I think, San Diego, right, where it takes place.
Los Angeles, basically.
Los Angeles,
now,
okay.
I think. Actually. Yeah.
So essentially, what we do as Scale is, I think, pretty tech-focused. OpenRheinRuhr is also tech-focused, but in addition to that, we're also looking after the political angle, privacy concerns, communities, that sort of thing, citizen advocacy, and so forth. If you take a look at our schedule, which has just gone live yesterday, you'll see that about a third of the overall talks is not just tech-focused, but also catering for that angle.
Okay, so if I go there, I'm probably going to see a bunch of speakers talking. Are those speakers solicited ahead of time, or is it more of an open conference?
No, it's in contrast to other conferences, like I think Scale is not an conference, and neither is OpenRheinRuhr. The CFP opened in May of this year, so people had about 4 months to submit proposals, and the selection of the slots was done early October. And we have now finalized the schedule. As I said, it just went live the day before yesterday. And it takes place on actually November the 3rd and 4th. So it's a little bit earlier than you said. It takes place in no worries. It takes place in Oberhausen, which is on the western outskirts of something called the Ruhr Valley. The big used to be industrial area in Western Germany. And as a matter of fact, we run it in an industrial museum that used to be an zinc works actually. So people were smelting zinc there about 100 years ago. It's a very beautiful setting because, as a matter of fact, much of the space, i.e. where we do the catering, where the social event takes place on the Saturday night, also some of the talks are presented in the middle of this museum, right between turbines, gear, and so forth. It's very, very, very beautiful. As a matter of fact, as part of your ticket, you get to see the museum as in a guided tour, if you choose to do so.
And do you record the event for people to be able to see even if they're not there?
Unfortunately, we haven't done this yet, but it's certainly on the cards to do this. The thing is that we don't have a very kind of significant broadband connection in the place. That has been a limitation so far, but as I said, it's being addressed. Unfortunately, because the museum will go under renovation in the next couple of years, that would be the last OpenRheinRuhr to take place at this museum, breaking a long-standing tradition, because I think OpenRheinRuhr has been there for the last, 6 or 7 years.
Cool. And so I know what open means, and I think Rhine is named after the river, right? What's Ruhr?
Rhine-Ruhr is the area where Oberhausen is located. It's the Ruhr Valley used to be the industrial hothouse in Germany about between 1890 and 1980.
Okay.
But with the demise of ironworks and steel going down, that area had to be reinvented. And this is one of the reasons why more and more tech companies are located there, because quite a few universities are based there, Bochum, Dortmund, and so forth, and they managed to imagine a tiny Silicon Valley right in the heart of Germany, and then you have it. And needless to say, OpenRheinRuhr, the conference, is very proud to be part of this ecosystem.
And so again, if I'm going to attend, what am I expecting to see? I imagine you have multiple tracks. Do you have like beginner and advanced tracks?
Coming back to your original question, yes, of course. The conference as such is divided in about 2 parts. We have ordinary talks, presentations. We also have the opportunity, or people attending also have the opportunity to get certified. The LPI, as in the Linux Professional Institute, does run so-called paper-based exams at the conference at a discounted rate, meaning if you want to undertake the exam, you can do this on the spot after a suitable amount of registration time, in terms of you have to pre-register. Then you go to the conference, and then you get and then you have the possibility to sit the exam then and there. And the third component of this is actually like at FOSS and other open source conferences, there is a small hall where projects have the opportunity to showcase their progress, their project.
So not necessarily like an exhibit hall, but or is there also that too?
There is that too. So we select a number of projects who have to apply previously. And then these projects get a small booth where they can put up a couple of laptops, a couple of PCs, posters, and so forth, and then talk to the visiting members of the audience, of the attendees, and discuss the project with them. And one of the projects who's normally there every year is actually GNU-PG. GPG also known as. And as a matter of fact, the founder of this project, a guy called Werner Koch, is delivering one of the keynote speeches at this year's OpenRheinRuhr. And this is something that we're pretty proud of. Because after talking to a guy called, what's his name again? Richard M. Stallman, if I'm not completely mistaken. Guy is connected to Emacs and runs some sort of free software foundation, I understand. Yeah. But I'm not really familiar with the details. So after talking to RMS, probably RMS giving out bitterly to him about the lack of Diet Coke, as well as a suitable software suite to address privacy concerns running on Linux, Werner Koch decided, and that was about 20 years ago, Werner Koch decided to sit down, and hence GNU-PG was born.
Oh, interesting. So I was curious, as you and Randall were chatting kind of about the conference, how it kind of started, like what the motivation behind starting the conference was, like who started it and kind of what their reasoning for starting that conference was.
Interesting question. About 10 years back, a couple of people sat around and had the idea of creating a small event, community-driven event, to address the increasing demand for knowledge in this field. Imagine a couple of people getting together for an install party, and then that event taking place and more people attending over the next few years. So, and then the museum got involved, and then things really started to grow, because essentially we're looking at now about more than 1,000 attendees on that weekend. So it was a community event driven by the community. And unlike LinuxCon and all the big commercial events, it's still a community event. The tickets are next to nothing. You don't pay more than you don't pay $1,000 or more like you would at LinuxCon. So you're looking at a few euros or a few bucks for that matter in American terms, and then you are in. And as I said, all the content for this conference comes from the community. Hence this call for presentations, hence the community involvement here, and hence also the possibility for projects to display their project at a booth.
Interesting.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, good answer. One of the things that I had found in my involvement with Scale is like we always strive to keep it as community driven as possible, similar to your philosophy with OpenRheinRuhr. But like at the end of the day, like there's bills to pay. There's things that you want to do with the conference. So inevitably you have to turn to you want to make it as accessible as possible. You want to keep the price down. But there's other. You need to turn to like sponsorship. So what is the approach that you guys take to kind of tackle those problems?
Same thing as with the other community conference. If I took a look at, for example, the FOSS rings a bell. It's a very big developer conference in Europe, normally taking place. I think I can plug this. Normally taking place end of January, early February. They have opened their sponsorship packages now. If you go to the website, you can register as a sponsor there too. Now, I think they are about 8,000 people strong because it's the biggest conference in Europe. So their packages, I'm led to believe, are way more expensive than ours. We do have sponsors. If you take a look at our website, you'll see the sponsors that are already live for this year's event. And needless to say, these would be, because of the character of this event, would be more like local companies sponsoring this. For example, there's a venue in close to Oberhausen in Essen called the Linux Hotel. That's the one. And also the API sponsors us. So this is essentially the list of the companies that give us money so we can host the event. Also, needless to say, the museum goes a long way to keep costs down.
So kind of along those lines, you mentioned, which sounds really amazing, the venue. I was kind of browsing the website, hoping to see some photos of kind of what the venue looked like. It sounds amazing.
There is a link to the museum on the website, on the OpenRheinRuhr website. If you check, unfortunately, it's all in German. If you check but I'm sure that Google Translate can do an excellent job here. If you check this out, you have a virtual tour of the museum on the museum's website. That gives you some impression of what we're talking about.
Okay, I will check that out. So the reason I ask about the venue. That's one of the other costs that always comes up when you're looking to host a conference. You mentioned FOSDEM, and my understanding is FOSDEM, and FOSDEM is I've never had the opportunity to go, but it's on my list of conferences that I would love to attend because it just sounds amazing every year. But it's my understanding that one of the ways that they're able to keep kind of their costs down is they use university space.
Correct. Yes.
So how is how does the museum fit into your kind of budget for the event? So do they give you the space for free, or is it like a discounted amount, or how have you like kind of negotiated that from your event perspective?
Before I answer that, one remark on FOSDEM. Please go there. And before you do, give me a shout, because it's on my list of conferences not to be missed. I go there I've been going there for every year for the last 6 or 7 years. So I would love to meet you and Randall in Brussels. I've already booked accommodation for FOSDEM, so I'm definitely going to attend next year. Okay, getting back to the museum. The museum pretty much meets us, I wouldn't say halfway, but they give us a huge discount when it comes down to rates. You can, one of their streams of income, apart from normal people going into the museum and visiting the museum, you can rent space there. But because of the community character of OpenRheinRuhr, we get this space at a discounted rate. So we are not paying list price for this, and it's all about the community. And they have recognized this, so they see it as part of their community sponsoring to kind of give us a discount, so we can keep the budget lean and small. If that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the other things I was curious about, again, like history, experience working like community events, rely heavily on volunteers to kind of run the event. How has your conference kind of handled that? Do you have like a list of volunteers that come back every year, or are you constantly like cycling through them each time, or what's your volunteer team look like if you have volunteers? I presume you do.
Yes, we do. OpenRheinRuhr is backed by an association called OpenRheinRuhr EV, and in EV stands for, it's German, it stands for Eingetragener Verein, essentially is a registered association. This is a core team of about 15 people that run the event from a contractual and legal perspective. In addition to that, we have a team of at least 30 volunteers that help us through the weekend in terms of setting the whole thing up, getting the gear in on Friday night, looking after the catering, doing on-the-spot jobs, moderating the tracks. I'm going to be moderating at least 4 of them this year, and then taking the whole thing apart on a Sunday night, Monday morning. And here's the deal, Gareth. If you come, and you can actually volunteer as a helping hand, if you will, through our website. There's a section called helpers, as in volunteers. If you click on this, you'll be taken to an automated registration system where you can pick and choose the areas of support you wanna help us out in here. And here's the deal, Gareth. If you attend this year's OpenRheinRuhr, I'm going to personally pick you up from the airport on the Friday night, bring you back on Sunday so you can fly back. So in order to be to be in Southern California on time on Monday morning, and I'm also going to make sure that you get and of course every helper gets, or every volunteer gets into the conference for free, and the same would apply to you. Just give me a shout, and you have your personal concierge service.
That is an amazing offer. I've never gotten that kind of offer from someone before.
And it's only a short trip, right? I mean, it's only from the West Coast to Düsseldorf, which that is the nearest airport.
Right. Yeah.
Just
short trip.
raise your hand.
So
same goes for you, Randall.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And you could do a podcast from the venue. Deal?
If only I had that kind of time to give away. Yes, I don't really have that time right now, but yeah.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year, yeah.
So I was also curious, how you are one of the I mean, you're here speaking to us about the conference, so obviously, like, you are involved with it. How did you first get involved? What led to you kind of taking the role that you currently have within the conference?
Very interesting question. It's pretty, I wouldn't say it's straightforward, but there's a little bit of history attached to it. It all started with my involvement becoming in the German open source community more and more. When we set up the LAC in Frankfurt, officially it has been around for the last almost 20 years, but we set up the Registered Association about 6 years ago. Needless to say, because of this involvement, and I've been sharing on the board, I've been serving the board rather for the last 5 years in the LAC and the LUG Frankfurt, and needless to say that brings along a certain exposure to other members in the community. So the more I got involved on the local level, the more I met people on a regional/national level. So in the beginning, I simply said, now look, if you need supporters, if you need volunteers who are looking after the catering and so forth, give me a shout. I registered through this volunteering tool on the website, and there was at 8 o'clock a Saturday morning, slightly hungover from the pre-show gig on Friday night, serving sandwiches and hot coffee. I mustn't have done an awful job, because over time I was asked to be a part of the organizing committee of the conference, and this is actually the first time now that I'm doing media relations for OpenRheinRuhr. If you take a look at our website, you'll see press releases that have been featured on heise.de, which is one of the major portals regarding IT in Germany. I reckon about 60 to 70% of the German IT professionals read it on a daily basis. It's like CNET, it's like CDNet or some other IT portal in the US. And since, as I said, since May, since the CFP went live, the call for presentations went live, there have been press releases on a regular basis, and they have been picked up by the media. Also, the idea of reappearing on FLOSS Weekly was part of this overall media plan. And thanks again, Randall, for having me here, because that does help a lot in terms of slightly more international exposure than just publishing press release and so forth and putting out the word in the German community.
Well, I appreciate being able to do this for you as well. I mean, it's like I've got my bully pulpit and I can use it whenever I want to talk about whatever I want on this show. I've been doing that for 11 years. I did want to talk a little bit about the relationship between your selection committee and speakers, because unlike Gareth, most of my relationship with conferences has been submitting a proposal, hopefully getting accepted, and then getting accepted most of the time. How many people apply for slots to this conference, and how do you decide what you can't include?
We have about, I think, as I said, the schedule just went live, so I think we have about 30 slots on the weekend. That means 15 slots each day. We get about at least 100 proposals, if not more. So the selection process has to be tough. Yeah. Unfortunately, we only have a limited number of slots, and we judge the submissions by the technical and non-technical merit. For example, somebody submitted something around the German version of the GDPR. You're probably aware that we have a new data protection regulation in Germany. That came into effect in May of this year, and I think the talk, if I understand this correctly, is about how this new regulation affects your increased privacy and how you can deploy software addressing this. And this goes back to what I said in the beginning. It's not just about technical content. It's also about kind of what's what I'm looking for, political and aspects regarding society in general. So there's a good mix now between technical content and non-technical content in that regard, civil rights and so forth. And this is basically how the organizing committee for the presentation selects content. I hope that answers the question.
That's pretty good. I mean, yeah, I think it answers it for me. But do you also have an opportunity for, say, lightning talks where people can, maybe the first time they've ever gotten up to speak, can talk for just 5 minutes?
We have thought about this, but then we dismissed this idea because there are plenty of other formats that address that in Germany. And lightning talks are great, but only go so far. The beauty about OpenRheinRuhr is I think that we have, I'm tempted to say, one of the best hallway tracks, meaning there's plenty of space, there's plenty of room between the individual slots. We have, due to the exposure, due to the location, we have plenty of room between the meeting rooms and the locations where the presentations are delivered, so people can get together and talk. For example, we have quite a large catering space, and that is normally equipped with groups of chairs around tables, and even outside the breaks, we do serve meals and so forth. Needless to say, you see people sitting there and discussing things, getting out their laptops, showing other people what they're working on, getting feedback, trying things out, and so forth. And that's exactly the spirit behind OpenRheinRuhr, as in consider one big hackathon outside the presentation locations.
And you mentioned earlier that you have 15 talks a day for both days, so like 30 talks total.
Give or take.
Yes. Is that multiple tracks or just a single track?
We have 3 tracks in parallel, but not all slots are in parallel. So, for example, the keynote speakers, we have 2 keynotes this year. Each keynote taking place around lunchtime, making sure that people can attend around the lunch break, and during the keynotes there is no other parallel track, to ensure that the keynotes get the kind of necessary exposure and that the keynotes don't have to compete with other slots taking, or with other presentations taking place in parallel.
And how about social activities? You got like a party each night or at all?
So yes, the crew organizes a pre-show gig for invited guests on Friday. We do have a social event that everybody attending the conference can participate. It's done on the Saturday night. There is, and this is a bit of a tradition, after around 11 o'clock, people take out their whiskey bottles that they have brought with them. This has been a tradition for the last at least 7 years, and I'm a little bit of a whiskey connoisseur myself. So I may know 1 or 2 whiskeys, but the amount of really interesting new whiskeys that I have seen there after 11 p.m., give or take, has been just amazing. You get the fancy stuff from Japan. You get single malts from Islay that I even wasn't aware of. And the OpenRheinRuhr, this is kind of an undercover bit. This is kind of a bit of undercover information. Has a certain reputation in whiskey circles about this exactly. But I think the notion, or the rumor rather, that people coming to OpenRheinRuhr just for this whiskey tasting, I think, is totally exaggerated. Although quite a certain amount of tasting does go on after 11 p.m. And when I first went there, I was quite impressed that this actually takes place. But needless to say, the party is also before 11 p.m. It starts around 6 or 7, depending on the schedule. And then it's open. It's more or less open, and the museum is also very kind here, because normally I think the curfew kicks in around midnight, but they have been very good here too.
True, and you'll have to eventually invite Monty Wydenius, the inventor of MySQL, to hang out. He always brings a flask of it's like a black vodka, and it is amazing. So yeah. If you want whiskey, I think that's probably, it's not quite whiskey because I think it's vodka, but yeah, it's still, you have to definitely get him at one of your conferences, because Monty's an amazing character as well. So
thanks for the hint. Greatly appreciate it.
Cool. And so so there's this social event that happens. There's the conference that happens during the day. What else can we see there? So you mentioned the exhibit hall. There's some exhibitors there. You mentioned the booths of the projects you have invited to be there. Is there anything else going on there?
As I said, people attending the conference do have the possibility of taking part in a guided tour through the other parts of the museum, and these guided tours normally take place during the course of Sunday. So you have to register for this. So once you get there, I say on a Saturday morning, and if you're interested in checking out more than 100 years of industrial history in Germany, just go directly to the corresponding booth, register for a tour on Sunday, and off you go. Then the tour I took it twice. It's run by volunteers as well, as most of the museum would be to a certain extent. And they take you through, as I said, the tour lasts around, I think, an hour, maybe 90 minutes. But they show you, I think, even parts of the museum that are normally closed to the public. So it's records, it's history, it's tradition. Once you do this tour, and even if you're not from Germany, I think you have a very good grasp of what was going on, especially during the first part of the so-called Industrial Revolution, taking place more than 100 years ago in Germany. That gives you a very good impression of what life was all about then, and how life has changed over the course of the centuries in this particular part of the country. And this is not just restricted to industrial things. Needless to say, with that sort of tour, you also get a good insight into the history and the politics surrounding this. So it's like a trip it's like a kind of trip down memory lane, if you will, if you're interested in German history, especially in this part of the country.
And as a speaker, I'm obviously, I get the usual technology and stuff. How long are your sessions? Do I have like 30 minutes, an hour? Are there different slots?
Yeah, we have two sorts of presentations. You can go either for a more workshop-oriented style, meaning you have about 90 minutes plus questions, but the majority of people elect the second format, going for a 45-minute presentation plus 50 minutes of questions. The exact split up varies. So you have more like discussion-oriented presentations, pencil in for an hour, that stop talking after 30 minutes, and then the rest is open discussion. Quite a few projects actually do this. For example, we had, I think, the founder of the Nakes projects there for a presentation quite a few years back, and what he did, he stopped after 30 minutes, and then it was open discussion where the project was at that stage, and this is what I found most amazing. And then the audience started to discuss with the presenter the roadmap for this project for the next couple of years. It's that sort of community engagement that makes OpenRheinRuhr pretty special, I think.
So one of the things I've been wondering about, as we talked about the conference and the location and kind of the planning and all that stuff. This is this one that will be taking place in a couple of weeks. Will be the 9th.
10 years running, but 9th occurrence. Yes, because we skipped 2012.
Yes, thank you. I lost the word for a second there. So 9th occurrence. In the 14 years that I was involved with Scale, we had there was all sorts of stories of things that went wrong, horribly wrong, just ridiculously scenarios that just you wouldn't even think could happen. I would imagine it's been the same for the OpenRheinRuhr conference. What is the in your experience, or I guess ones you've heard about? What is the biggest the biggest or most hilarious problem that you've ever encountered in planning an event?
Hasn't happened because essentially you're talking about German precision engineering, right?
Fair answer.
That was a rhetorical question, right? No, jokes aside, you do, with that sort of history, you do get a few hiccups. So, for example, there was one year, I think it was the year before last, when the location contract hadn't quite been signed enough in advance. So the thing was a little bit on the edge with regards if we formally could avail of this location. But after that sort of history with the museum, you know these people. So even although the paperwork hadn't been done, we actually did it on the spot then and there. we could still avail of the space. But as I said, these kind of are minor hiccups because normally, and this is a very important point. If you take a look at the website, you probably don't see the amount of automation going on behind it. For example, we use something called FRAP, which is based on Pentabarf, as in the exact speaker management system that FOSSDEM uses or FROSCON uses for that sort of event. I think FOSSDEM uses Pentabarf or FRAP even now for managing I think 200 plus talks that take place over the weekend, or even more, including deaf rooms. So the helper tool that you see, you go in, you register yourself, and then you pick and choose what you want to support for each and every slot. When you want to take part in catering, whether you want to help to set up the whole thing on Friday night and so forth, then we have a ticketing system. If you send a mail to say Presse as media relations at OpenRheinRuhr.de, this is being picked up by something called OTRS. And then the queue management and all the rest of it takes place automatically in the background. The website itself is a hardened WordPress instance. So many people, because essentially the whole team is dispersed around Germany, it's not just located around Oberhausen, so we can work together as a team, although we are geographically spread apart. That was one of the key focal points when the whole thing was set up to put an infrastructure in place that would allow that sort of event being managed and taken care of with a minimal human involvement, but still scalable. And this is something I think we can be pretty proud of, because I don't know that many conferences that have that sort of infrastructure in the back end.
No, that's true. I mean, I was going to say it's a testament to a well-run conference of one. I mean, the question that I asked you of like what the major problem was, and the one that you came up with was, well, we hadn't signed the paperwork, but we were able to sign the paperwork. I mean, that's a testament to a well-run conference, but it's also a testament to having those relationships, which you do clearly with the museum, with the venue. So you're able to kind of go on, build on that relationship, use that relationship to ensure that your event still takes place. But it's also a testament to how well run the event seems, based on hearing it. I mean, never attending, but how well the event seems to be run, of how much thought you have put into the automation behind the scenes. Like anything you can do to make your attendees experience as seamless as possible, knowing that like there are fires in the background, but minimizing the amount that it affects attendees it's a testament to a well-run event. So one of the final questions I had, just kind of thinking about the event in general, is it's located in Germany, but how many what does your attendee base look like? Do you have, is it strictly like European and German attendees, or do you get people that are coming more international from like the United States or other parts of the world coming out to the event in Germany?
That's a very interesting question, because as you rightly observed, it takes place in Germany. So in the beginning, as I said, about 10 years ago, the audience was strictly local. You had local companies sponsoring this and local people attending. But more and more, as the word spread, more and more people from different parts of Germany were attending. And with the involvement of key sponsors like the Linux Professional Institute and so forth, the event got also a more international recognition, if you will. Needless to say, also I wouldn't. If I say increased level of professionalism when it comes down to media relations, doesn't help, because I'm not trying to brag here. But the more you put such efforts on a professional basis, the more people will listen. So one of the things that we did for the first time this year, actually, we reached out to international podcasts. So I sent mails to Linux Mint people. I reached out to, as a matter of fact, to Dan Lynch, but I think he never plugged the whole thing on FLOSS Weekly. And a number of other podcasts were involved. And if you take a close look at the Linux Mint podcast over the summer, you hear Rob and Isaac talking about the possibility of actually coming to Germany. But I think at the end it fell through because they couldn't get the logistics involved or had some budgeting issues or whatever. So more and more, the more you reach out, the more people will listen and the more your international audience will increase.
I'm here in Florida. That's about the farthest east I go most of the time. So, Germany's way over there. And so it's a little trickier to do the logistics of going all the way to Europe. So I try to do it only once or twice a year. So I understand that sometimes it's not like that. And I also appreciate your frustration in that you talked to Dan about possibly promoting this show earlier in the year on FLOSS Weekly, but FLOSS Weekly is not a news show. It's not like the old Linux Outlaws, things like that. So we try to do more, magazine-oriented stories where we're good for a year or two, without having that. No worries. No problem. Yeah, no problem. So I did want to ask a really important question to me, should I decide to come next year, which is this all in German, or are there some English talks?
Randall, as soon as you register for attendance, as soon as you put in a presentation on Dart, I'm going to make sure that you get a simultaneous translator, and if it's just down to me, that's fine, assigned to you. Jokes aside, we do have some limited international exposure, but the main conference language would be German. We do get the odd international submission. We are trying to increase this. As I said, we are kind of in the beginning of improving the international outreach. But in contrast to FOSDEM, it's mainly German. It's still mainly German these days. But as I said, with an increased level of international exposure, I think that will change.
Yeah, because all I remember from German class that I took, as I said, maybe before the show, but I took like 2 years of German in high school, and it was like completely useless to me now. All I remember is Aus bei mit nach Zeit von zu, which I think are like the adverbs or something. That's the only thing I remember from German class. How to tell time.
Are you implying they don't speak German down in Tijuana? What's wrong?
They don't know. They do definitely not speak German. They speak very much Spanish there. So I know much more Spanish than I know German. So yes.
Sell the apartment right now. Get a spot in Pennsylvania where you can brush up on your German. No big deal.
Not a problem. Hey, we're almost out of time. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to make sure people know about this conference and your future activities?
If I can actually plug it, it's, as I said, it's on the 3rd and 4th of November. Make sure, if you want to come along, make sure that you attend. Please, make sure that you attend both days. Accommodation can be a little bit scarce, so if you're serious about this, look after accommodation right now because it's quickly selling out. And needless to say, if you want to be part of next year's action, the CFP will open around May time frame, and watch out for more plugs on an international scale next year.
And you mentioned scale only accidentally because you're talking about it in the conference there. Yes, but no, not related.
I hope I can reach out to Gareth so that he can kind of plug it as a community too.
Absolutely wonderful. I have to ask my two final questions always of all my guests. One is, what's your favorite text editor?
It's still Emacs.
Emacs! Yes! I'm happy. I'm so happy. Thank
but
you.
You won't be happy about the second answer, I'm afraid.
I'm already ready for not winning the other answer, which is, what's your favorite scripting language?
It used to be Perl about 25 years back. But it's not, I'm afraid.
Well, that's okay. You said Emacs. That's all I really care about today. Because there is and I'm sure you've heard this in previous shows, there's a little bit of me in every copy of GNU Emacs that ships. And that is I wrote the pretty printer, which takes an S expression and makes it nicely indented so you can see it easily. So I wrote that. Richard Stallman, mentioning the guy that we talked about earlier, called it brilliant. And so I'm very happy that there's a little bit of me in every copy of Emacs that ships, because it's me. It's my pretty printer. It's all good. pp.el. So if you ever see loading pp.el, it's like, it's me.
Last question from my side. Very last question from my side. When is your book on Dart coming out?
It won't be a book on Dart. It'll be a book on Flutter, which will be about how to build iOS and Android applications using a common language for both. First will be a training course that I'm developing right now. Okay. I'm actually in the midst of it. But I'm already a GDE for Google, which means I am a Google developer expert. I think that's what those letters mean. Yeah, on Dart and Flutter. And so I'm already answering questions online. I'm, representing them at conferences and things like I am next week at ATO. So soon, very soon, very soon I'll have a book out.
Let the world know.
Absolutely, absolutely. If I could do a Flutter presentation at next year's OpenRheinRuhr, yes.
Come. I mean, the offer still applies. If you can't make it next year, I'm going to pick you up at the airport next. If you can't make it, I'm going to pick you up at the airport next year. Just say the word.
And that's much better than ATO is giving me this Saturday. So yes, it's always great. I was just amazed at how much you take care of your volunteers. That is so totally cool. So appreciate it. Thank you, Christoph, for coming on the show today, talking about OpenRheinRuhr. Hope you get a few more people coming this year, and hopefully a lot more people coming next year because of our promotion today. And we'll see how that works.
Thank you for having me. And I'm a big fan of the show. It goes without saying.
Oh, well, thank you also for that. So that was Christoph talking about OpenRheinRuhr. What did you think there, Gareth?
Gareth, yes. No, I mean it sounds like a really fun event. It sounds like a really fun event and a really awesome venue. And it's in Germany, so I mean, what's not to like there? I'm always excited to see. I honestly admit I had never before the show. I had never heard of the conference OpenRheinRuhr. But I always like hearing about conferences that I haven't heard about, because I think as for the free and open source community at large, I think events where people can gather and talk and meet and collaborate in person are so important to just the community in general. So it's always good to hear like new events and even like events you haven't heard of just existing in parts of the world. So really interesting. You know how much work it takes to go behind the scenes on something like this. There's I'm just attending as a speaker or something, right? And I go, okay, I got to show up at 2 p.m. in that room on Saturday. It's like that for me. That's the end of it. But you're working months at a time ahead of the conference, and then do you actually even sleep at all during the weekend of the conference? So I do now, because I'm on the other side of it, which is nice. I mean, it's the very first conference I ever went to where after I stepped away from Scale, the very first Scale I went to, where I had stepped away from it, was amazing, because it's like, all the work that goes in behind the scenes, but you're able to just kind of sit back and enjoy it. So yeah, I mean, it's, me personally, when I was involved, it did not seem like the few weeks beforehand that I was not sleeping at all. Yeah. I mean, the week after, like, it was just like you go into it coma. Seems like you put yourself into a medically induced coma, because you sleep and just crash hard. But yeah, there's a lot of work. So I'm glad we were able to have Christoph on just to explain, just to give people, I think that attend conferences like you and I were just saying, that see it like as its polished end of the day kind of fabulous thing, to know how much work, how much blood, sweat, and tears is going on behind the scenes. Hopefully not really blood, because that's gross.
Yeah. Well, it's also like, so I no longer speak on the Insight Cruises cruises, but the first 30 of them, when I was a speaker almost every time, it was like I needed 3 or 4 days of vacation after I got done with the cruise, and people couldn't understand that. It's because I was on for the entire time of that week or week and a half cruise. I had to be on, and that adds up so much. It adds up so much. You don't realize that there's that much of really being concerned about your physical presence, your on stage presence. And I remember, the times I've spoken at OSCON, the times I've spoken at Scale, there's so much involved with making that happen, even just as a speaker.
Right.
That you don't understand what's behind the scenes until you've been behind the scenes, and you more than most people I know that very well.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, there's as I said, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. That if the conference is being run well, most attendees will never see probably 90% of what's going on behind the scenes. But there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. So. I feel fortunate, as you said, I know probably more so than most, but I feel fortunate to know when I go to a conference, if like a little hiccup happens, I know that probably behind the scenes, what you're seeing is like the tip of the iceberg of potentially what could be happening. So, I mean, it's like most things. It gives you a better appreciation of it makes you more appreciative of what's the conference that you're attending, of what's going on.
Yeah, exactly, definitely. Okay, so speaking of behind the scenes, let's talk about who's coming up next week. For those people who've been clamoring once again for us to do another blockchain show next week, another one of those. Monero, cryptocurrency, but private, untraceable, and fungible. I have no idea what all those keywords mean together, but whatever. All right, TideLift coming after that is gives maintainers and core teams the way to get paid for the work they love. Just added, actually, it's not just added. I forgot about it 2 weeks ago, but we're going to have another host of another show on this show. He does the show. I don't have his name right there. It's Michael Tunnell. Michael Tunnell is going to be talking to us about This Week in Linux, which is a news show. It's been running for about a year, and it's a weekly news show that covers the latest news in the world of Linux. We need more shows like that. I mean, and now that Dan Lynch isn't doing Outlaws anymore, so we cover a wide variety of topics, he says, from application distro releases to Linux gaming and even news about the core systems like Linux kernel itself. Michael Tunnell's going to come on this show and talk about his show, and we may actually see him back as a co-host occasionally, so that'll be kind of nice. I love getting new people in my rotating panel. Invoice Ninja after that, powerful suite of online tools, invoice clients, collect payments, create proposals, expenses, time tasks, and more. And after that, Kong, which is an API gateway. It's a form of middleware between computing compliance and your API-based applications. Following that, and I can't believe we haven't had these guys on our show since day one, OpenVPN. OpenVPN, you're probably all using it every day, actually. So this is really good that we're going to get somebody on to talk about OpenVPN. Go to twitch.tv/FLOSS. That's the homepage for this show. You see all the upcoming guests there. We have a live stream at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays at live.twitch.tv. That's Pacific time, yes, right? You can follow us. I don't know what to say about this anymore, but you can follow us at Floss Weekly on Google+, the soon-to-be-deprecated service, and at Floss Weekly on Twitter. You can follow me at Randall L. Schwartz, also on Google+, the service is going away, and at Merlin on Twitter. And again, I'm trying to figure out what to do after Google+. Next week, if you are in Raleigh, North Carolina, you might see me because I'm going to be at All Things Open. I'm going to be giving a talk. I'm going to be there as Floss Weekly, representing the show here. I'll be at Siegel, SEAGL, in November. That's up in Seattle, talking to people there for a couple days. I'm going to be at KubeCon, something like that, in December, also up in Seattle. So if you see me at any conference, please come up and say hi to me and say I love your show, whatever, or I hate your show. That's fine too. I don't care. Just tell me that you listen to the show, even if you hate it every moment. It's okay. I'm fine with that. Gareth, anything you want to plug?
I will also be at Siegel. So the dates on that are November 9th and 10th. So I'll be speaking there. It's actually a new talk. So pretty interested on that. I'll be comparing postmortems to the Death Star. So we'll see how that goes.
Wow, that sounds interesting. I'm definitely going to be sitting in on that talk for sure. Anything else you want to plug?
That is it. I'm good.
Okay, Gareth. Hey, thanks for bringing your expertise, as always, to this show, and especially about your production expertise in terms of being able to make a show, because you know more than most people how tough that all is.
Yeah, no, this was a fun one. Thank you for having me as co-host.
Absolutely, Gareth. Wonderful, and we'll see you all again next week on FLOSS Weekly.